Good morning, friends. Welcome to the Global Macro Desk, episode one. Today, I would like to talk to you guys about mental models and a specific mental model I use when thinking about financial crowds. So, let's get started. But before moving on to mental models, I'd like to mention Hyperion. This is from the Bibliotheca Historica, uh, Diodorus Seculus. Of Hyperion, we are told that he was the first to understand by diligent attention and observation the movement of both the sun and the moon, and the other stars, and the seasons as well, in that they are caused by these bodies, and to make these facts known to others, and that for this reason he was called the father of these bodies, since he had begotten, so to speak, the speculation about them and their nature. So I find that quote to be important because when it comes to global macro investing, I think that is our goal. We need to understand the world before we can act in the world, because without understanding, our actions uh, don't bear the fruits that we hope they should bear. They become meaningless. So understanding should come before action, especially when actions have consequences, especially since actions have consequences. So we have to be inspired by Hyperion. By diligent attention and observation, understand the world around you. Without understanding, there can be no progress. The first step then is to develop a framework or a mental model that forms a scaffolding in which observational data is processed for insight. And I think this is extremely important because, unlike in physics or, let's say, the hard sciences, uh, in finance, we're constantly dealing with a large amount of incoming data, and without a framework in which we can process that data is meaningless. It's not going to lead to any kind of understanding. It's not going to lead to a tradable position, and most likely, that's how you lose money. So, so before talking about mental models, we have to ask exactly what a mental model is. So a mental model is a tool of the mind. A mental model is a representation inside your head of an external reality. Mental models are the basic units which construct a person's worldview. It is a representation that a person has in his mind about the object he is interacting with. We have to understand that what we call reality is what it really is an internal representation of data coming from the outside world. Your brain constructs your reality for you. It's an automatic process, right? But we we can actually augment this internal representation with new experiences, with new knowledge, with new understanding. So as our understanding progresses, our the representation of the reality of outside reality in our head becomes clearer. When I say clearer, it means um, the the mapping, it becomes much cleaner, and that's what we're really looking for. We're looking for a clean mapping to the world around us. Without this mapping, uh, things like there, it's very difficult to interact in a meaningful and profitable way um, in the world with the world around us. So why is this important? Our mental, and so the more important aspect of this is that mental models shape our actions. How you see the world, how you see the world uh, defines the range of actions that you can take, right? Like if because I'm sitting at a table right now, my brain has constructed a representation of this table, so I can reach out for this table. But if like this table, if I wasn't able to represent this table in my mind, there would be no reason for me to reach out, right? So mental models shape our actions. So we need to have good mental models. Without appropriate mental models, we have no useful method of interacting with reality in a meaningful way. Mental models create the context or framework which allows us to understand the data. Pure data is devoid of context, meaning, or understanding. If I were just to throw a million zeros and ones at you, it's meaningless to you. And that's what just pure data is. It is meaningless. It's the framework or the mental model that provides the context, that provides the meaning and the understanding. And with the understanding, we can make decisions. So before trying to tackle the task of understanding the markets, we must first begin with good mental models. So what is a mental model? For our purposes, global macro investing, we have to be pragmatic. A good mental model should be able to answer questions like, how is this happening? Why is this happening? Right? So, if interest rates are going up, how is that happening and why is it happening? Yes? Now, you can have multiple answers for this question. Um, question like answers that range from what is actually happening to, conspiracy theories. Oh, there's rigging going on or whatever. But the point is that the without without a good mental model, you will not be able to answer even a simple question like how is this happening or why is this happening? What are the future implications? So now that you have a grasp on now that your mental model has given you a grasp on how things are happening and why they're happening, well, what does that mean? What does that mean for the future? What am I supposed to forecast? Like, what is my forecast based on my understanding, right? So then once you have a forecast, then the next obvious question is, all right, what should I do? So if you think interest rates are going up, you understand why they're going up. Um, you can form a you can form a thesis that, all right, so interest rates are going up. That means such and such assets are going to do well, and such assets are going to suffer. So then, what can I do? What should I do? I should get out of the assets that are going to suffer, and I should get into the assets that will do well. Um, so I hope I'm making it clear uh, why I would like to begin this series with mental models, um, because they really are the most important tools um, for global macro investing. So good mental models are simply good, meaning useful, profitable maps to reality. Good mental models allow us to interact with reality in the most effective and profitable manner possible. Right? So I'm talking about mental models as they apply to the financial world, but mental models are equally needed in every other aspect of life. If you're doing if you're trying to live day to day, whether you're trying to do science or any other field, any other human endeavor, you need good mental models. So good mental models for us will lead to good global macro, which leads to alpha. Bad mental models lead to bad global macro, which gets you wrecked. Good mental models lead to good understanding, which leads to profitable actions. And this is just generally true. It's not just for global macro, it's for everything else as well. So I would like to now talk about a mental model of crowd behavior, because that is what we are actually dealing with when we are uh, in the market for financial instruments. You are dealing with a like a crowd of market participants, and we need to sort of be able to gauge what a crowd does, how it does it, what does it mean, and hopefully try to understand, hopefully build a profitable position out of it. Right. So I've found while it is difficult to understand the behavior of individual market participants, it's far easier to understand them in the aggregate. Right. So it's uh, crowds in the aggregate uh, are are more predictable than individuals. Right. Because there's a infinite variety of the kinds of things individuals do, right? But as individuals form into crowds, the range of outcomes becomes smaller. Like the range of outcomes becomes a smaller and smaller set of things that can possibly happen. So it's easier to understand them in the aggregate. Financial markets are the sum of transactions of people. A person may be unique and complex. People in the aggregate are simple and predictable, especially when it comes to financial decision making. Why is this? This is the case because human nature is constant. So I'm going to get back to the idea of human nature being constant over and over again, but I'd like you to keep that in mind. Human nature is constant. The way people have been reacting to different stimuli, market stimuli, or financial or economic stimuli, or to incentives, is no different than it was 2,000 years ago versus today, 4,000 years ago versus today. People are still people. So traditional economic models assume financial markets are efficient. However, modern research in behavioral finance and psychology shows that investor behavior is dominated by behavioral and cognitive biases. These biases translate to irrational and inefficient markets. Behavioral and cognitive biases in decision making of investors in the aggregate creates market inefficiencies that can be exploited to generate alpha. So technology has progressed, but human nature remains constant. This constancy is the reason we see repeating cyclical phenomenon in the financial markets, trends in reversal, booms and busts. Betting on humans being humans is one of the few laws that we can really rely on in the financial markets. Few ideas have withstood this particular filter. So, we talk about when we're dealing with hard sciences, it's easy to formulate, like it's a far simpler task to come up with some general principles that apply generally to natural phenomenon. You know, whether it's conservation of mass, conservation of energy, the laws of gravity. Why is this? This is because there is a uniformity in nature. I'm using the term uniformity in the same way that Hume would be using the term, that nature doesn't change. Day to day, the underlying laws that govern our universe are relatively constant, and because they're constant, we can understand them. This is not the case for financial markets. Financial markets are constantly changing. But the one thing that doesn't change about financial markets is that humans are humans. And so we have to understand humans, especially humans in the aggregate, right? So if there was like beyond even more fundamental than the laws of supply and demand, or the laws of or the law of one price, which in day-to-day situations are broken. Like law of supply and demand, it doesn't necessarily have to hold, but humans being humans, that holds. So it's even more fundamental than the laws. I'm using I'm using I'm quoting with my fingers here. Laws that we see in economics aren't really laws, but I'm willing to bet that human nature being constant is a general law in the field of economics. So a financial crisis in ancient Rome plays out damn near identically to a modern day financial crisis. Why is this? Because once again, it's humans. It is humans being humans. So a human with a stone tablet is no different than a human with an Apple tablet. If you understand this, the world becomes much clearer. Our reaction function to market stimuli remains uniform through time. So then the most natural question to ask here, the most important question to answer here is, how do humans react to fear, greed, and uncertainty? If we can answer this question, we're well on our way of understanding crowd behavior, financial crowd behavior. So I'd like to start talking about herding. This is a very important concept. Without understanding the concept of herding, a whole range of market phenomenon uh, don't make sense. They're very difficult to parse. So herding and dispersing can be defined as behavior similarity or dissimilarity brought on by the direct or indirect interactions of individuals. herding occurs when decisions when people make decisions sequentially with later people watching and then imitating the actions of earlier people in the sequence. So it's a sequential phenomenon. I make an action that someone else can observe. They follow my they commit to the same action, and it becomes a chain of actions, um, it sequentially. So herding more simply occurs when a group of investors trade on the same side of the market in the same security, or when investors ignore their own private information and act as other investors. Herding reflects a low dispersion of opinion among the investors about the interpretation of information. Herding, more simply, is a natural human response in the face of uncertainty. There's a sense of reassurance and comfort that people feel being aligned with consensus opinion, right? And this is something that we've seen for the last even the current market cycle, or let's say from 2009 onwards, right? It is far easier to be wrong in a crowd than it is to be wrong alone. It is far easier to just follow along than to go on your own, right? And this natural human instinct, this natural human behavior is reflected in the markets, because remember, markets are made up of people, right? So, herding in the financial markets initiates cascading effects. Cascading effects manifest as quantifiable market phenomenon that can be exploited for alpha generation. So here's a chart that I've made a while ago on the sources of herding. So we can see that there's five main sources. There's really no need to get into them, but you can see that herding, uh, there's multiple reasons for herding. Yes, not just people following other people. There's built-in reasons, institutional reasons, social reasons, economic reasons to uh, do the same thing as everyone else is doing. Uh, so now you have reasons for herding. So then, where is herding actually observed? You can see herding in the forecast of financial analysts. They all come up with the same number, or a number close to the same range. It's the same estimate. Uninformed investors who trade on the endorsements of experts. Yes, we see this all the time. Some smart guy comes on CNN or Bloomberg, says XYZ. 100 other people will jump on that trade. Institutional investors, investment banks, sovereign wealth funds, and hedge funds. Because remember, they're all following the same research. No one wants to be the odd one out. It is extremely difficult being a contrarian, and for most times, uh, herding works. Yes, until it doesn't. And then obviously, we can see herding even in traditional and social media. Right? It's not just for this is not just for market related phenomenon, it's social phenomenon as well. So how can we exploit herding? So herding in the financial markets manifests as trends in prices. It creates momentum or persistence in prices, which is a source of predictability. Herding is an example of a positive feedback loop. The dispersal of a herd in the financial markets is equally important. This manifests as a reversal in market prices. Herds once formed can't last forever, and the markets, which are driven by investor behavior, can't remain dispersed forever either. So herds form, but they can't stay formed forever. They have to disperse. But once they disperse, they can't remain dispersed forever either. This is important to understand because this, I believe, is a source of the boom bust cycles that we see, the trends and trend reversals that we see in markets over multiple time scales. So over any time scale, we can see the cyclical patterns emerge in the financial markets. Herding is a multi-scale phenomenon. It is observed on short, medium, and long-term horizons. A model which tracks the aggregate behavior of market participants serves as a coincident indicator of the market cycle. Market cycles are mean reverting in the sense they go from one extreme to the other like a pendulum. The cyclical and stable nature of aggregate investor behavior, in my considered opinion, is the only dependable and quantifiable source of constancy, stability, and predictability that can be exploited to generate absolute regime independent returns in the financial markets. A model that can quantify this phenomenon should be considered the holy grail of finance, the holy grail of trading at the very least. However, this is easier said than done. So this is a nice graphic of summarizing what we've just been talking about, what I've been talking about, is that of herds forming and herds dispersing. Financial markets are constantly switching between these two regimes. It's very important to understand this. So then, all right, so then what exactly is the herding cycle? So we can begin with the herd dispersal. This is the bottom of the market. Yes, it's the bottom of any market that we see. So uh, market has collapsed now. We are at the bottom. And then finally, something new happens. Some new idea strikes the market. Yes, some new innovation comes into the market. Innovation in the sense of Kindleberger, or some new zeitgeist emerges. Some new, hot sector emerges, and so a new herd starts to form, and that's the market. That's a market trend taking shape. Then that's number two, or the second part of the cycle. The third part of the cycle is the herd maturation, right? And this is where the market trend solidifies. These are these beautiful 45-degree lines that you end up seeing, right? But then once again, this can't go on forever. Nothing moves, you know, in a linear fashion forever, especially in the markets. So then you'll reach a point of herd climax, something will break in the market or some shock will happen, something will happen, and then this herd has to disperse, and you're right back at one again, right? And then a new cycle will form. But then you can also link the the physical phenomenon of this uh, formation and dispersion to the emotional market cycle, to the emotions of the market participants, at least in the aggregate, right? So herd dispersal is would be considered pessimism. That's the bottom of the market cycle, right? Her genesis would the emotional counterpart of that would be skepticism. This is a new trend taking shape. The early movers are the ones who move first, and other people watch on. But they've just been hit with a market bottom, a financial crisis, and they're not so keen to jump in. Then herd maturation, uh, the counterpart for that would be optimism, right? Now the trend is taking shape. Everyone is on the same side. Um, the news, traditional media, hedge fund analysts, all these guys, they all are saying the same thing, right? Investors, retail guys are jumping in, and times are good. And then we reach the climax of the herd, and the emotional counterpart here would be euphoria, right? So that's the top of the market cycle. And then we've seen euphoric episodes even since 2020, and we've seen exactly what's happened to them. A great example would be, ARK, Kathy Wood, or even Bitcoin, right? We see the boom bust cycles in Bitcoin, and it's the same thing, right? So we can link the actual physical formation of a herd and the dispersal of a herd to the emotion, like we can link them with the emotional content of the market participants in the aggregate. So then what exactly does it mean for her? What exactly is herding? Herding then would be, we would, if I, if you're seeing momentum, you're basically seeing herding. When you're seeing herding, you should see momentum. When the momentum break, when momentum breaks happen, you get mean reversion. So you know you have to end up going back to your mean trend line, and mean reversion is essentially, once again, it's just herd dispersal, right? So when so it's really important to sort of link these concepts together, because once you link these concepts together, you can look at a chart or you can look at the state of the market. You can start understanding, start analyzing in a meaningful way, right? So momentum and mean reversion. Financial markets are constantly switching between these two regimes as well, right? So once again, to drive home the point, momentum is no different than herding. Mean reversion is no different than herd dispersal, right? And momentum trading is herd trading, right? Mean reversion trading is herd dispersal trading. So with this mental model in hand, we can link observed market phenomenon, momentum and mean reversion to aggregate investor decision making. This mental model links the observed patterns of market prices to investor sentiment and consequently investor decision making. And I hope that you can see the value in this the same way that I see the value in this. This is one mental model of a large set of mental models I use to understand the markets. And remember, please think of me as a student of the markets. I don't claim to be an expert. I've basically started this video series uh, to be, for the sake of clarifying my own thoughts, of having a running log of not only my thoughts but um, macro thesis that I'm trying to form, in pursuit of a executable trade. Um, and I think we are at the most important juncture the financial markets have experienced in a very long time. We are seeing things that haven't happened for decades, maybe even a century, and this is the perfect time uh, to uh, to become involved, to structure uh, uh, to structure great portfolios so we can benefit, so we can profit in the markets. Remember, these times that we're going through don't these kinds of times don't happen often. They happen once in a generation. They happen twice in a generation. And if you can't make it in this environment, there's no point to any of this. So I uh, I would like to thank you guys for listening. If there's any questions you have, please comment, email me as well. I'm happy to talk. Um, and Have a great day. Stay tuned for episode 2.